Welcome back to the Al Franken Show. I'm Al Franken. With me, of course,
I'm Catherine Lanford. We're going to turn now to whistleblower Rick Piltz. He resigned in March from the office that coordinates government climate research over what he says is the Bush administration politicization of scientific reports. You know, I can never say that word. Can you say it for me? Yeah.
I can't either.
Basically, he thinks they mucked with the scientific data. Rick Piltz, welcome to the Al Franken Show.
It's a pleasure to be here.
Thanks.
They're just terrible, aren't they? I mean, the interview's over. You just say yes. No, I mean, okay. So what they did is, on global, what you did when you blew the whistle on, is this guy Philip Cooney, who was in there, and before he came to the White House, he worked for the American Petroleum Institute
as their climate team leader.
As their climate team
right,
leader.
as the strategist for working the administration away from the Kyoto Protocol process.
Right. Comes into the White House, and he's like the last hand that writes on their global warming science reports.
Yeah, it was one of the things he did, yes. The White House sort of tries to characterize this as though it's all a collegial process, like a bunch of people sitting around hashing out how to communicate this stuff clearly, but actually, the science professionals will draft and revise the report until they think they have it right. Then it goes to the White House for the final markup, and it never goes back to
Okay, now
anybody
give
else.
us examples of how he altered the report.
Well, I was dealing with things like the strategic plan for the climate science program and the annual report to Congress, and these things have a combination of where are we with the latest scientific research, what are the key issues we're studying, who's going to do what, and so forth. And he would go through and make sometimes literally hundreds of changes in final drafts of these documents.
Were they always in one direction?
Yeah, right.
I'm going to guess.
There's a cumulative effect. In some cases, whole chunks were deleted. In other ways, they would just change a few phrases, but to play down statements about observed warming, to really not want to talk at all about the projected larger climate change in the 21st century, to not want to talk about the likelihood of adverse impacts on ecosystems and society, and to not want to talk about anything that had to do with adapting or mitigating.
Now, what happens in an office like that? Does a scientist go and say, this is crap. You can't allow this guy to do this. Does that happen? Or
no, I think the career science managers in the agencies, and I was dealing with federal agency people, really tend to defer to the White House politicals, the administration political appointees. If they're at the table, and this is something that was new with this administration, the Council on Environmental Quality, the White House Council on Environmental Quality, where Cooney worked, is a direct arm of the White House political operation on environmental policy. The State Department representative at the table is our chief climate negotiator, non-negotiator, Arlen Watson.
And he's a political appointee.
He's a political, right. And so there are people, I mean, this was a program, it's 12 agencies, they have supported billions of dollars worth of research. It's a great scientific research program, but it's generally been run by science technocrat professionals who work closely with the leading people in the science community. Now, all of a sudden, there are these political people there who are clearly there as to perform a policing function. It sends a signal to the career people that this is politically uptight, controversial stuff. So people then start writing their material to slant it toward what will clear the White House, and then even after they've done everything to water things down, the White House comes in and takes one more stab at it.
Okay, this has to be sort of antithetical to what every scientist does with their work.
But I think the administration has really generated a lot of distrust and ill will in the science community. It's obvious that they will not engage in any kind of forthright, straightforward discussion of the mainstream science on global warming and climate change. I mean, this G8 statement that they made, what they've done it's so lame. I mean, it's backwards.
Okay, I missed it. What did they say at G8?
Well, basically, there's a statement on global warming that
Oh, he said it was might be man-made.
right,
Might be.
and even 4 or 5 years ago, the most authoritative international assessment, the IPCC, and the National Academy of Sciences said, you know, the evidence points to most of the observed warming over the last 50 years being due to human influence, and we can project the likelihood of much greater change in the 21st century, and they just will not adopt that vocabulary.
Let's talk for a minute about how long you had worked for the government overlooking these reports.
I worked in the Climate Change Science Program Office. Actually, it was called the U.S. Global Change Research Program, and then they renamed it as a rebranding under this administration so that the White House could say that they had a new program. But I worked there for 10 years, and before that, for 4 years on the staff of the House Committee on Science, Space, and Technology.
All right, so
which is where I got into this, learning about this program.
Okay. What prompted you to become a whistleblower?
Oh, it was just the cumulative effect. I mean, this started in 2001, for example, when they, at the same time that they were dropping out of the Kyoto Protocol negotiating process, they were acting to suppress the National Climate Assessment. I mean, this is the most comprehensive scientifically based assessment that's ever been done of the potential implications of climate change for the United States.
And how did they suppress it?
They've just, Philip Cooney, I think, just directed, the White House directed the program leadership that this national assessment, which is a whole body of documents, I mean, there's an overview, but underneath it there's a stack of reports produced by eminent scientists all over the country, that it would never again be referred to in any program document. No report to Congress, the strategic plan for research.
So
You know,
it's just killed.
Yeah, essentially, and there will be no follow-up to this. You know, and none of these things are above, you know, criticism. What did we learn? How could we do it better? But this was just flat-out suppression, and it's just, I think, fairly obvious why. The assessment points to all sorts of likely adverse implications of climate change for the United States, particularly depending on what region you live in. Or
And the logical result of that would be, or implication would be, that you have to start cutting down on the use of hydrocarbons and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, and their guys are oil and coal guys.
Right, and also thinking about how you're going to adapt to the changes that are already underway and that we've already bought into more of, just from the long-lasting emissions that we've already put up into the atmosphere. I mean, we're putting billions and billions of dollars of infrastructure in coastal areas that are likely to have problems with sea level rise and storm surges, and so mitigation in terms of reducing emissions and adaptation to climate change. But you can't even begin to think about what to do about it if you can't even have a conversation that acknowledges that there's a problem.
Is this an overall, in this administration, an overall disregard for science? I mean, not just in global warming, but in other aspects. Have you noticed that, or is this just your area?
Well, I think that this is a great example of a broader pattern. I mean, the Union of Concerned Scientists has put out reports that show how the same pattern extends into other areas, and it just depends on the particulars. In some cases, manipulating the composition of an advisory committee. In some cases, it's direct pressure on federal scientists to alter their scientific conclusions in order to avert some regulatory implications. So I can speak in detail about this particular issue, but it's not an isolated case. It's clearly part of a larger pattern.
Okay, thank you, Rick Piltz, who resigned in March from the office that coordinates government climate research. And thank you for being a patriot and a hero. Thank you. We'll return with the Al Franken Show in just a moment here on Air America Radio.